Hello and good morning. Good to be here with you. Cisca? Have you lost sound?
Oh,
can you hear me?
Are we live? 1 second.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go. I'm sorry. I accidentally pressed mute. I thought I was pressing the mute button because we had the in session thing, and instead I pressed the speaker button, the mute button for the speaker, not the microphone. Oops.
No problem.
It's not a morning without a tech issue, right?
Yeah, that's what we get for scheduling things first thing, right?
So how's everything going with this?
I think it's going pretty well. So you have a lot of convention experience. So how far back does that go in your life? Is that when you were a toddler or?
No. So I feel almost like that's a trick question. So I started going to Dragon Con my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
And I'd heard of, I live in Atlanta, and I'd heard of Dragon Con. It was part of it would occasionally pop up. I live outside of Atlanta, so it's always funny because people are like, oh my gosh, this thing's going on in Atlanta. Dude, I live on the north side. The secret of Atlanta is nobody who lives in Atlanta really lives in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like, oh, I live in Atlanta. And they're like, oh yeah, where? And then you're like, you name another city. And what ends up happening. And I had a friend who was in the Army, and he's like, oh, you people from Atlanta, you're so messed up. A city does not, you don't say you're from a city that you're not from. That's how it works in the South because, we have big city and then we have tiny little cities.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And this guy was from California or something where they have tiny cities in California, but I guess he was from the city.
Yeah.
So he didn't get it. It gets exhausting being told all the time, I don't know where that is on a map. Can you tell me?
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Vancouver, Washington, and no one has heard of that, but it's right outside Portland, Oregon. So I would just say I'm from the Portland metro area. Yeah.
See? And, so I remember hearing about Dragon Con, when the, All Good Things Come to an End, which was the last episode of Star Trek aired.
Mm-hmm.
So, but other than that, it was just out of my brain. My best friend in college, her family went all the time. And so I occasionally joke that anything I do at Dragon Con is ultimately her fault because I never would have gone to con without her. So Dragon was actually my first con, which is rather unusual, I guess, among the con organizers because we were doing a thing and just socializing, but Dragon Con people, it's like authors. The con ends up coming up, work ends up coming up. And they just kind of stared at me for a second. And they're like, you're kidding me. And I'm like, yeah, no. And which I think that was also the first year it was in 2 hotels.
Wow.
So just to give you an idea, if you have a con, that's a 5 more buildings have been added since then.
Yeah.
So anybody who says they're intimidated by Dragon Con, I totally understand. But
I tried to go one year, but I couldn't get a hotel, and I didn't. I really only like going to conventions if I can stay on site. So
it's just
we abandoned it that year, and then ended up moving to Europe, and then it just became a whole other thing. So
yeah.
But I was so upset. I was right there to book my hotel the second that it came open, and they had posted the wrong link for it. And then they had a Facebook group somewhere where they got the proper link. And so it was sold out by, the 10 minutes later that I figured out what had happened.
My recommendation to any any professional who wants to come to the con, and a hotel room is just a very intimidating aspect for it. Mm-hmm. When you apply, put in there on the notes that you're willing to pay for the hotel room, but you just need help getting the reservation. Sometimes DragonCon can help with that. Sometimes they can't. You never know. The contingent on that is a lot of times if the con sets up your hotel room, you don't know which hotel you're going to be in until just before, a lot of times, which is a logistical problem. I have a friend who it makes them a little too antsy to do that, which as an excessive planner at times, like that's how I take out my anxiety is by planning.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. I can understand that. So, but in the con, actually the con itself actually books the hotel room for most of the directors. So, which is nice.
Okay. That's awesome.
I joke that they pay a lot for a closet that we don't use. So that when when we're sitting there punch drunk from exhaustion, they can tell us it's time for you to go to your room. We know where it is.
Go to your room.
Go to your room. Oh, I have a volunteer who will tell people that is part of his job, is to make sure I receive at least 4 hours of sleep a night and that I have one hot meal a day.
Because good thing to have.
Yes. I generally have the rule, people will say at cons, it's 4 hours of sleep, 1 shower, and 2 meals a day. I try to go for 3 meals because I get cranky. I get hangry. Mm-hmm. That's not good when dealing with people.
Yep.
And then the other thing also that I do is I tend to do 2 showers.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, especially in that.
Mike, 1 second. Viking, open the door.
Do you have a minute?
No, but what's up?
I was going to ask you if you could look at my room because I cleaned it.
I told you I will inspect your room after I am done with this thing.
Okay. Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
He has to clean his room today. And he is very eager to prove that he can clean his room on his own without his mother's influence.
That is awesome. Getting some autonomy there. That's a good thing.
I just because he got in trouble earlier, and so he's trying to prove that he's a good boy.
I have seen that. Yep.
So, and I believe in giving him routes to victory, not just like an ambiguous, I'll know you're good when you're good. No, that you can be a good boy by doing these things.
Yeah.
So, so I started, that's when I started going to con, but then, I get 2 showers a day. That's my thing. As I shower when I come in from the track, and then I shower when I get up.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea after being around all those people. And
people will be like, "You smell good," and I'm like, "I bathed."
small victories. I adulted today.
Yes. But so I started going in like 2001, 2002, maybe, and then I took a break. I think in my bio, I joked that I ran off to play Army. So, and then it's very funny because I came back. I was like the consummate party person. I used to there were some cons back before I joined the Army where I got 4 hours of sleep for the entire Dragon Con. The dumb things you can do in your 20s.
Yeah, I don't know that I was ever. I mean, I probably could have, but I love sleep so much. So like 6 hours is like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired.
Oh wow, yeah, no, it's easy to have happen at Dragon Con because you're so busy. There's so much stuff going on all the time that you don't even really notice it. Gary Poole several years ago did a thing where he lined up the number of hours of programming and activities. He said it's equivalent to 5 years of time.
Dang.
And that's before we did, we added in Thursday.
Wow.
And now we go Thursday to Monday. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. But we have something for everybody. Earlier today, my child goes, "I'm bored." And I'm like, only boring people are bored. And he goes, "What?" And I'm like, you can find something to do. And Dragon Con is very much the same way, because everybody at Dragon Con has stuff going on. And there's so much there's something for everybody. If you don't like this panel, that's fine. Go find one you do like, because I guarantee you there is something there you will like. And you just have to, like, somebody went one time and they went, well, my friend's very miserable. And I'm like, or it was their girlfriend. And I'm like, your girlfriend's just going to be miserable. And at least you found that out before you married her.
Yeah.
I'm not known as I'm not known as a sympathetic person. I'm the person who I'm like, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. So if you want something, say it. If not, I don't have to know.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both people in the coupleship having the common interest there of the nerddom things. Like, it makes me really sad when I hear about someone who's really into some kind of fandom and their partner isn't and doesn't support them in that.
You don't always have to understand it. I was married at one point, and my now ex-spouse was complaining, and somebody goes, you just need to be more sympathetic about it. And I looked at them and I went, I'm into the nerdy stuff. I just also believe you gotta, like, finish putting away the laundry before you start playing the video games, because once you get on the video game, you're not getting back off of it till bedtime. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, well, and I'm like, no, I'm the one who buys the Dragon Con tickets. I'm the Dragon Conner. They're like, oh. Because we were into different kinds of nerdiness. Because you can do that. Like, I would I'd give him a hug and a kiss, and I'm like, go have fun playing Magic the Gathering, because I have nothing to do with that. It's not my jam. I'm going to go play with all the books and smell the book and listen to the authors talk, because that's my jam. So,
and we appreciate it so much.
Well, I really do love it. So I actually fell in. It was very funny, because I went to my first track, and I joked that I just stayed there because I went in and I went to my first. I think we were looking for the night at pre-panel, and there was the hour with, like, Todd McCaffrey that was going on in the. I think it was the Worlds of Anne McCaffrey track at the time. And it kind of changed its names. And then it ended up, and I walked in, and I am a huge Anne McCaffrey fan. JR loves to tease me about it because he likes to convince me that Pern is fantasy because it has dragons, but it has genetic engineering to make the dragons. Therefore, it's not fantasy, no magic. And so, CJR, if you're listening, Amy agrees. You're wrong. It's like an ongoing thing. He tries to trick me into saying Pern is fantasy all the time on the podcast. And he's won once because I was very tired and I was just reading. I'm like, but he, so I went in and I ended up meeting Todd at waiting in line for the next panel, actually. And I like people as individuals, people as a group, not so much. Like, massive groups make me nervous. But so it was very funny because he actually was in line right in front of us. And my best friend goes, you should say something. No, I'm going to turn into a babbling idiot. And so my friend, who was not one to take no for an answer, tapped him on the shoulder and said, she wants to talk to you, but she won't. Thank you. I still remember that.
Gotta love those kind of friends.
You know, and but she'd been going to con for years, and so she kind of understood that it wasn't as awkward as that sounded.
Yeah.
And because I'm going, no, you just don't do that out in public to people. And so Dragon Con, I joke that it's a home planet for people. It's so much. It's this own little. It's a world. It is literally. It's 85,000+ people, but it's this own vibe, and you can almost feel it in the air when you go to downtown Atlanta during Dragon Con, even if you're not in the convention footprint just yet. And And so that's kind of the love that I found for it. I found people who understood my geekiness.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I guess that I never really left was I eventually started volunteering, and I did a year or so volunteering with first as an unofficial volunteer. So I didn't have a badge that said volunteer, but I helped out in small other ways, like going and getting people food. I served as a panelist, I think one time even. And then I was an official volunteer, and then and then when I took my hiatus to go play soldier, and started my own family, I ended up, when I came back, they'd merged the sci-fi, the merged Wheel of Time and Anne McCaffrey's track into a track and split off sci-fi and fantasy into two different tracks. And that kind of became
okay.
So that's why I'm like, if you look, I kind of just stayed in the same track.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did volunteer for about 2 years with Sci-Fi Lit before becoming the track director that I am now with track.
Okay.
And I volunteered
Cool.
with another small con in Savannah that I don't think is around anymore. And then I've staffed with LibertyCon there too.
Nice.
In Chattanooga. Which is a fun convention. It's very different because it has a very different vibe because it's small.
Yeah, it's small. It's like 800 people ish.
So it was 750. So how they did their incorporation for their nonprofit, because they fund a scholarship, so they're a nonprofit.
Okay.
Is that they have a cap on it, and that was done because Uncle Timmy Bellagio, and everybody just called him Uncle Timmy. And he was, I remember meeting him, and he was like, "You're going to call me Uncle Timmy." And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so." And he goes, "Everybody does eventually. Just let it sit there in your head. It'll jump." Okay. But he found a lot of the conventions that were in that area, and up in Chattanooga, and even some down into Atlanta. So when he set out to found LibertyCon, he wanted one that was going to stay small and stay very focused on writing. And so it really has. And his daughter is now the con chair, Brandy. And Brandy is an amazing, very classy woman who has handled a ton of different things, from going virtual this year, last year just canceling because everything was such in flux. There wasn't time to set up a decent virtual one. To 1 year, the hotel changed last minute, and they were like, "We were under renovation. We're not going to get it done in time." And she's like, "So we're going to change venues." So they changed venues, and they were like, "Actually, oops, there's a scheduling conflict. We need to move." So she changed venues and dates in 1 year, and so just she has dealt with so many curveballs and done it with such a great smile. But it's really fabulous convention. So I think I did the math several years ago, and it was like for every one just regular con goer, there was like for every one author, there were like 3 con goers.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's very high ratio of authors to fan, and you can literally walk down the hall and see book deals going. Cool. That's where Mike Massa got his first book deal. Tony Weisskopf actually like interrupted the panel he was on to hand him his contract.
Nice.
He was all, Mike Massa has like the body and build of like Lego Batman. Having been a Navy SEAL, but he's sitting there, he's up there in like a nice polo, and he goes, "I have to take care of this." and then like whips it off and goes on handed knee, because Tony was also on the panel, and presents it to her on bended knee. The sign. Wow.
What a great moment.
It was wonderful, and I loved seeing it. And the funny thing is I didn't really know him at the time, but now I'm good friends with him and his wife, and they're just fabulous.
That's very cool.
And that's one of the things that's really nice. I love Dragon Con because you get to see so many people.
Yeah.
The smaller cons are so nice because you get that one-on-one experience. And I joke that DragonCon, you get to see everybody, but LibertyCon, you actually get to see them more than once and talk with them.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to prefer the smaller cons as well.
Yeah, I have a friend who made a comment one time about DragonCon. She, it was her second convention. She'd been to LibertyCon. And she goes, I'd have a problem in like the Labor Day, the Memorial Day crowd at Savannah, and not to mention the St. Patrick's Day crowd. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
And not liking it. And she's just like, but I don't notice the DragonCon because I've been going there for so many years. And she looks at me and she goes, I figured out what it is. And I'm like, what is it, Natalie? And she goes, you don't see the crowd. And I'm like, yes, I do. I see them. I'm not walking into people.
Yeah.
You don't see them as a crowd. Every floor of every building we've walked into, there is somebody who knows you by name without looking at your badge.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start having some of those because DragonCon, we're one big convention. And so we get like the star power of some of those major conventions, but we have the fan tracks, and the fan tracks are almost like their own individual convention.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You have your community within the bigger ecosystem.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, you walk into fantasy literature and you know it's fantasy literature, not YA, not urban fantasy or sci-fi, because we're decorated differently, because DragonCon's very good about giving us the room to do a little bit more of our own thing. So like I have book covers on the walls. I have a table in the back with books to give out for prizes that authors have donated, or and I have like a bookmark that we stick in. I try and stick in as many of the books as I can.
Yeah.
Don't forget to review, and here are some tips for reviewing. Like, you don't have to finish all the book. Just some of those things. And don't forget to do stars. So I do that. And, if this book isn't your cup of tea, find somebody who is and donate it to them, type thing. And because sometimes a book isn't just isn't your cup of tea. You think
it doesn't make it a bad book. It's just not your taste.
Oh yeah. I read a book, and I don't remember what the title is, but it was a very good book. But it's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Like, and I read like the N.K. Jenskin's Broken Earth trilogy. It was good. I will probably never reread it. Mm-hmm. It's very dark for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the story was compelling enough that it carried me through all three of them, but it wasn't enough that I'm going to be like, ooh, I love you, my precious. I will pick you up and read you again. Yeah. And that's fine. There's more time. As one friend put it, she goes, more time for you to read other books. By the way, here's my new book. I'm like, that was subtle, Belle. That was subtle. So, but we decorate the walls with posters of book covers that authors have donated.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And it's great because Jared is always telling me it takes like 7 times to see a book cover sometimes for somebody to want to buy it. Mm-hmm. Like, if you can get that book cover in front of somebody 7 times, then you definitely are more likely to make the sell.
Yeah.
And so we have, and it's really awesome because DragonCon is very open and very friendly to no matter if you're trad pub or indie. And, at least fantasy literature is, because I have so many friends who are indie authors.
Yeah.
So, and that's, the podcast has been great for that, actually, because I meet so many people through the podcast, and I'm like, I've actually taken to using podcasts in some ways for doing some of my research into individuals. So I know how to handle them, because if I can listen to an hour-long episode to figure out like what are some of the themes this author plays on in their books, what are their hobbies and interests? Because that's one thing that I told one of my friends who, Jennifer Blackstream, and she has a master's in psychology. And she's like, I never use it. I'm like, put it on, because you don't know. We may do a mental health panel in the science track. because we have over 35 different tracks. So, yeah, it's a lot. It takes a huge conference. It takes a ballroom just to have all the directors sit down and talk.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, but it's a lot of fun. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything else in the world, except for maybe some more sleep occasionally. But I have a kid, so I'm not getting more sleep anyways.
So. That's so cool. So, what is your advice for an author to make themselves a appealing candidate to a track director to come on as a, because like I've applied to DragonCon and have never been selected. So like are there any guidelines?
So we don't have any official guidelines. Every year is kind of a different thing. Sometimes the guest committee, you know, the year we did, we introduced diversity tracks. Steve Barnes was our guest of honor. They're all very savvy people, so I know that was not a coincidence. But I would say we try to have a variety of everything and get as much of all the different kinds of things going on. I'm not on the guest committee, so that's one thing I'm going to say is understand this is my having talked to members of the guest committee, trying to figure out what their logic is, because it's like a mystery for everybody. And I like to know how the cogs work. So I would say when you do your short bio, you don't need to put, this is going to sound really mean, cold and callous, but I said I was not the nice person. I don't care where you're from. If you're from Bowling Green, Kentucky, I'm going to look at that and go, cool, my mom's family is from there, cool. Drive on. And because it doesn't a lot of times make any difference unless what you have to say is very specific on point to that. Like if you're from Nigeria and you're writing a story set in Nigeria, that becomes very interesting to me now.
Yeah.
But, you know, we get lots of people from Ohio and Kansas. We're in the United States. That's not a huge differentiation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But think about usability. Is you want to have stuff out there that makes you more usable, because we want to try and get every person onto a minimum of 2, ideally 4 panels.
Okay.
And so the more things you have in your bio that say, I do this, means I can now, like Jay Boyce, she does Twitch and gaming. She does some stuff with translating in Japanese. So she's great for, she does lit RPG. So you could panel her in digital media. You can panel her on Silk Road. You could panel her on sci-fi lit, writer's track, fantasy literature. So it makes her more marketable because more tracks can use her. So if you're so niche, and more people think that they're niche than they really are. I know that sounds really weird, but because they have different backgrounds, like Casey Azel's another author who she's been an attending professional a lot. She's a double Dragon Award finalist also, but she gets paneled on Apocalypse Rising, the Mill SF track, science fiction, science, writer's track, fantasy literature, so she's definitely made herself marketable to those. The nice thing is, and I spend a lot of time like casually meeting with authors, because a lot of times what will come back is if somebody's kind of borderline, they may email and ask the track directors, hey, do you think this is somebody who's usable for you? Okay. And if the answer is yes, I never hesitate. And sometimes there's people who I've been like there was one person I went, if we go digital this year, I want this person because this person understands how to use tech. And I'm not going to have to explain to them how to use their web camera. And that for me was a major selling point.
Yeah.
So I would say that the big thing is making yourself marketable and approachable. Put as much like weird, Like, don't be like, so I have a 6 toe, but like, you know, if you have a master's in science, even if it's something you don't use, because if you have a master's degree in psychology, you probably use it without even thinking about it when making your character designs. So that in a lot of times, most of the authors we have at least 3 books.
Okay.
Out. Most of them don't put any crazy asks on. Like there was one person who one time told the guest committee that they needed $20 a day per diem for food, and their book was coming out in a year, and they wanted the Dragon Con to pay for their hotel room. And it's like, no, I don't do that for your publisher. Why would I do that for you?
Yeah.
So, I mean, be reasonable in your ask. Like, it's not unreasonable to ask, if I get accepted, I will need help booking a hotel room. We understand that there are a finite number of hotels and hotel rooms, and we do our best to make it so that people can get them. But so we do understand the crunch of that.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, be reasonable in your asks. If there is something where it's just like, you know, you're a big name author, but you're from Europe, you may need it. You feel free to ask. I mean, the worst thing you can say is no. If it's not conditional of you coming, say, this is not conditional, but would be nice.
Yeah.
So, because, it's a huge work getting it.
Yeah.
But there is, and I tell people also, I'm like, if you feel that you're one of a dozen authors who write the same thing, which most authors don't, they apply early. I always tell the authors, apply early, because we're not going to take away, but we're not going to take away your acceptance if we've given it to you. And if we've accepted 15 lit RPG authors, we're not going to accept 5 more, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and you don't wait until every application is in to begin reviewing them. No, so you'll have your selections before.
Yeah, we do our selections kind of the guest committee meets on a monthly basis. Okay. This year they started meeting later because we had to first find out a couple things, like how big of a convention we were going to be allowed to have, how many of our people were rolling over. But typically our application process, and you can find it on the website when it's open. You won't find it now because it's closed. But typically our application process opens October 1st.
Okay.
So, and I know some people who, like, they have applied and they apply right at like 12:30 a.m. on October 1st. And I know somebody who's like, it's not up yet. And I'm like, it is not even 8:00. Let them get to the office. Because there's Dragon Con, for all the world that we are such a huge convention. We have 2,500 volunteers in change.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the individual tracks, like my track is the average size staff group of volunteers. It's only 7 of us, including myself. Tech Ops has 300 people.
That's not surprising. That's a lot of stuff to have to wrangle.
So, and they're actually looking for volunteers. So if you're watching this and you're like, I want to go, but I don't want to buy a badge, Tech Ops is looking for volunteers, and they will train you. So they will do like the Tech Op training so that you know what you're doing. But yeah, it's those are probably the biggest things. Is just be careful of what you ask for. If you ask for too much, it's not going to make sense for us to bring you. Apply early. But the Dragon Con office only has like 6 people in it. So
wow,
year round. So yeah.
So be gentle and understanding if it takes a little bit to get a response to a message.
Yes, they do their best, but there are only 6 of them and a lot of us.
Yeah.
So they're drastically outnumbered. But yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing, is just making sure. And then once you I'll give you the follow-on question, what to do if you've been accepted. Because that's the one that I get asked sometimes and sometimes not at all. And I'm like, you should ask, which is, So you get it. And what I tell people is go look at the website, look at all the different fan tracks, see if there is anything it's job hunting 101. If there's anything that you think you fit into, that you have a particular skill set or background of, and then email those track directors. And you can go through, and they're pretty good at funneling things to the right spot. You can also, a lot of the track directors are very findable through their Facebook groups, like Urban Fantasy, Fantasy Literature at Dragon Con, Sci-Fi Lit, all have Facebook groups. And so you can message through those. You can message through an email, and email them and tailor your introduction letter. For example, Doug Burby has done stuff with weapons development and cyber warfare stuff. He's an author with Badass Publishing. The email he sends me should look different than the email he sends Science Track. Because Science Track does not care as much. They might find it interesting, but they're not really looking for a guy who writes military urban fantasy to do a panel on science. They're looking for a guy who's done, I've helped DoD with developing weapons doctrine and blah, blah, blah. They're looking for that. That is much more interesting to them. So kind of tailor it, almost like you don't have to go long, and just so that you put your name in front of them, because it's like this book cover thing. The more I hear your name, the more I'm going to go, oh wait, I know that person might fit here. Yeah. And then there's the Facebook groups. I tell people also, if you are super hard into wanting to be on the fantasy literature track, some of the really easy go-to things to do are you can download the app and look at previous year's programming. I have a few panels I do every single year, like Delphic Oracle. We're doing a new panel called Tropolicious that will be where we're going to talk about, authors get to talk about their favorite tropes to use and stuff. But and then there's some where we rotate them and some where we kind of do a theme. Like I did a magical creature theme for several years where we talked about cats one year and then horses and birds and during the next 2 years. So it's all different options. And you can be like, hey, Robert Ross is an author, indie author, who I had on a romance panel. Not because, and I never would have thought to put him on it. He does not write romance. He writes urban fantasy. And he looked at my programming. He goes, and then he looked at, also, I put panel ideas on Fantasy Literature's page because I don't know everything and I'm not going to pretend I do. So sometimes I'll throw up panels and I'll be like, does this sound like something people would like? And sometimes people are like, you're crazy. And I really want to do a panel called Pun Wars, and the only people who want to do Pun Wars with me are like SM Sterling, David Weber, Regina Kirby, our director of programming, is like, I'm not going near that room. And I'm like, yeah, no, and then we put mason jars with their names, and people can vote on either who's the best or the worst, whichever one they want, and they can escape after they've donated, like a lock-in. They're like, no.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I think it sounds like a blast, and we may end up doing it so there's all different kinds of things, and I've seen people literally like volunteer themselves for paneling through that. And Robert Ross he emailed me and he's like, based off of your paneling in the past and based off of this, I fit into these panels, and this romance track I will panel. I don't have a lot of romance in my books. My characters do get married at points, so there is some romance, but I feel I have a lot to say about that and how I think romance should be shown and addressed and how to write a romance theme. So he was the only non-romance author on the romance panel.
But it's good to have that other perspective coming in.
Yeah, but he literally volunteered himself for it. So somebody was like, how did you get on 5-6 panels of your first year? And he's like, I did exactly what I was told to. But it worked. So, and you just kind of got to work the the system that has no clear-cut rules. So,
Yeah.
And like we have a dating panel. I love the dating panel. And
That sounds amazing.
it is the dating game, and we put people up and they pretend to be their characters answering these questions and going
Wow.
on the show. Yeah. We did the YouTube for it last year, YouTube version of it last year, because we did Digital Dragon. And it is so much fun. And I do try to give authors the option on that one, or let them volunteer for that, because some people aren't okay with that. It takes a lot of witty think on your feetness to do that. And but yeah, that one's fun. We did Blinking Beasties. We have a lot of fun, and that's that. But those are the things. I would say when you're on a panel, you are actually more marketing yourself than your books, if you make sense. Because if an author has something really interesting to say, I'm going to assume they can write an interesting book. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that is all fantastic advice, and I think any prospective guest attendees will get a lot out of that. So thank you very much for sharing the inside scoop on there.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we're very happy to have you here at SFFCon and all of your wonderful experience. And if you have panel ideas and anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. And that goes for anyone who's watching too. If you have programming ideas for SFFCon and some ideas of what you'd like to see here, we are very open to making this the kind of convention that you want to attend.
Yes, I've had a blast so far. It's been a lot of great. I would say when it comes to my stuff, I told somebody, I'm like, what I'm telling you is a way, not the way. And SFFCon's been a ton of fun, so thank you for having me. And I look forward to our Lit RPG panel tonight.
Yes.
And then we have Magical Cultures tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that will be fun.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of the con and see you around.
Okay, see you.
Hey, if you like that panel and you're looking to continue your author journey,
or if you're just looking for a group of like-minded people,
all striving to improve their crafts and grow as authors, our community at KSM might just be what you're looking for
some reading, writing, and everything in between.
Come on over and join us at Keystroke Medium.